what we're talking about today is opening it up, letting that light shine. And then I'll be giving you some examples of that. I'm going to end today's message with some words from a modern-day mystic named Ken Wilber. Now, he's been on the cover of the Science of Mind magazine. He writes articles in there, and this piece that he's writing about letting your light shine is quite beautiful. So that's how we're going to end today. So I want to begin with a little quote by Charles Fillmore, who is the founder of Unity. He wrote something called Talks on Truth, and he says, "Love is in the world in a diluted form as affection between husband and wife, parents and children, friend and friend, but it can be made manifest in its original strength and purity by each man and woman opening the fountainhead and letting its mighty currents spring forth." So we've all got that within us. We can all let that mighty fountainhead spring forth. So how do we do that, and what exactly is this all about? I want to suggest it's something we can do today. We can do it right here and right now. Open our hearts and think about that, letting that fountainhead of strength and love flow forth from us. There's an article that was in the Science of Mind magazine. This was way back in 2014. It was written by Dennis Merritt Jones, and he called it "Reviving the Heart of Humanity with the New CPR." And so we're going to have a little translation of what CPR might stand for. He writes this. He says, "Mending the heart of humanity," and for our context, we can think about this fountainhead, opening the fountainhead, sounds like a daunting task, but if we're willing to be proactive and act mindfully rather than react mindlessly, it can be revived. We must each become experts at administering spiritual CPR to every person with whom we cross paths on a daily basis. This includes our face-to-face encounters, both intentional and by chance, as well as the countless people we may contact with via the internet or see on television while watching the world news. And distance doesn't matter, because we all share the same name, human being. We all share the same heart. We are all one. And in this idea, we also need to include ourselves in this CPR. So the first C, the C in CPR, is compassion. And Dennis Merritt Jones' definition is compassion is the capacity to imagine what it must feel like to live in another person's skin and take appropriate action to help alleviate suffering when possible. That's what he says compassion is. They did some studies to see, is compassion only in human beings or is it in all living beings? And of course, what do they choose? They choose rats. And they had some rats in little cages like this, and then they had other rats in a more wide open area, and they wanted to just see what would happen. And those rats in the big wide open area, they would go over to their little penned-in friends and figure out how to open that latch and let that rat out. And it wasn't to play with them because they were funneled into another pen. So they weren't like, oh, now we got more friends. That wasn't it at all. They just didn't want to see that rat penned up like that. And the other thing is the rats had the option. There was another cage, and in that cage there were 5 chocolate chips that the rats could have if they learned how to open that latch. They didn't work on that one. They worked on opening the latch for their fellow rat. I mean, really, if the rats can be that compassionate, perhaps we as human beings take a page out of that book. Ernest Holmes said, in his reader on practical wisdom. He says, compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the most gentle of human virtues, for it is the outpouring of the divine givingness through all. So compassion is really something, it's a divine quality that we all have, and certainly something that's worthwhile becoming aware of and making use of in our lives. One example of a compassionate person, there's a biography written by a woman named Audrey Davis, and the biography is on a man named Dr. Howard Kelly. He was walking, doing like a hike in the northern part of Pennsylvania one spring, and he got thirsty, and so he stopped at this farmhouse and knocked on the door to see if he could get a glass of water. Well, a little girl answered the door, and he said, you know, I'm just a hiker, and I could use a glass of water if you would be so kind. And so she goes, and instead of getting him a glass of water, she gives him a fresh, cool glass of milk. And that really fortified him, and it really made him feel good, and he was so grateful to her. And so they chatted for a little while, and he left. And years later, he's operating on this same little girl. She came to the hospital, and he's operating on her. And when it's time to give her the bill comes, and he's written across it, paid in full with 1 glass of milk. You know, that's compassion, and it goes a step further with this guy. He's estimating that he charges only about 25% of his patients that can afford it. And the other 75% don't get a bill, they don't have to pay, and because his fees from the people that have the money cover the people that don't have the money. And he also hires then a nurse for these people once they're out of the hospital, gives them a nurse to take care of them when they can't afford it. I mean, talk about compassion, just out of the goodness of his heart. So that is the C of CPR, that compassion. And then the P is patience. I forgot my cough drop. I was going to bring it. But here comes Jeff with some water, so we'll see if that works. So now the P in CPR is patience. There's a writer and a lecturer from the 1800s. Oh, and there's ask and ye shall receive. Thank you. There's a writer by the name of Henry Drummond. He wrote in the 1800s, and he wrote a book called The Greatest Thing in This World, and one of the things he talked about in there was the chapter of 1 Corinthians 13. We used to call it the love chapter, and I'm going to read it for you because it is beautiful. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, love is never boastful, nor conceited, nor rude. It is not self-seeking, nor easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongdoing. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, trusts, hopes, and preserves. In a word, there are 3 things that last forever: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of them is love. And about this, Drummond wrote, love is patience. Remember, we're on the P, CPR. Love is patience. This is the normal attitude of love. Love waiting to begin, not in a hurry, calm, ready to do its work when the summons comes, but meantime wearing the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Love suffers long, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, for love understands and therefore waits. So when this fountainhead, this opening of this fountainhead occurs, that's our love. Love waiting to be undammed, waiting to be let out. That light of love that is within us. But how impatient we can be. I mean, think about your day-to-day life. wait for the light to change, wait for the computer to come on. My gosh, I sometimes think it's dead, and a few minutes later it comes to life. So many things, like waiting for somebody to meet you. Where are they? They're 5 minutes late, for crying out loud. What's up with this? We're impatient. The tendency is for us to be impatient, and it's very important for us to be open to this idea of just letting love, that light within us, guide us to being patient. It's going to be a better world as we relax and let it be. Merritt Jones writes, patience is the ability to breathe and be with what is in the moment, trusting that as we continue to mindfully mend our own hearts one day at a time, the collective heart of humanity is mending. And I'm going to interrupt myself with that quote, because I like to remind people, as we change our consciousness, as we become more loving, as we become more forgiving, more accepting, more tolerant, it affects the situation around us. Everything goes up. Everything. I have experienced this time and time again. I've read stories. I've heard stories. This is how it works. I like to think that what we come here and hear Sunday after Sunday is not just a shot in the arm that God loves us, forgives us, go your way in peace. I like to think that what we hear here are practical ideas and little gems of wisdom that we can take with us and use in our everyday life. I know one of my sisters who she belonged to this church where the message was the same every Sunday, and it was like, you're lucky Jesus died for you, because otherwise you're going to hell. So that was the message. And she said, yeah, we get that, but what else? How can we use our Christianity in our daily lives? And I think here, we talk about that a lot. We are very pragmatic in our studying the principles of science of mind. So he goes on, and this is Dennis Merritt Jones, before I so rudely interrupted myself. The practice is to be patient with ourselves and all others, remembering that it can take time to mend a broken heart, especially one that belongs to 7 billion human beings. And again, it's just so important for us not to think that what we have to do is just, it's just too big, what can I do? How often do we hear that or even say it? What can I do? Well, what we can do is work on our own backyard, our own families, our own homes, our own responses to life. We can work on our own hearts. And by doing that, even this group here, as we all do that, that's a powerful, powerful thing to do. Just to, and I believe when we do that, we do raise the consciousness of all the people around us. And when we think of how many lives each of us touch, we can make a difference. So we did compassion, patience, and now we're going to go to the R, which is reverence. Oh, and I want to tell you one other thing about this. This collective heart of humanity is mending, and how that works. I told you I have read many stories and heard many stories about how this works. I'm reading this book by a guy named Richard Kyte, K-Y-T-E, and he tells about, he was going into a meeting, and the meeting was expected to be kind of contentious. There was, a lot of this is my idea, this is his idea, this is not. So he goes into this meeting early, and he sits along the side, and as people come in, he looks at their faces, he looks at each of their faces, and he determines in his own mind what is good about that person. What good does that person have to offer? In other words, kind of blessing them, just bringing that good out. And that's what he did, just sat there and did that. And he said during that meeting, he felt this overwhelming aura of love in the room. And I believe, and he believes, that it came because of what he did. He let that fountainhead of his heart bless each and every one of these people, recognizing the good in them. And if he goes to a meeting like most of us do, when you walk in, you're like, oh no, not him again, not her again. They're going to cause problems. Instead of that, he's looking at them thinking whatever good he can think about that person. Unbelievable. So anyway, now we go on to reverence. To practice reverence is to remember that there really is only one of us here, one with a capital O. We are all part of that one. Holmes says in Science of Mind, God in me is unified with God in all. I am one with all people, all things, with all life. As I listen in the silence, this voice of all humanity speaks to me and answers the love that I hold out to it. I am one with life. I wait in the silence while the Great Spirit, capital G, capital S, bears this message to the whole world. So, we don't open this fountainhead by force or guilt. We open that fountainhead by blessing, by love, by knowing the good in ourselves and other people. That's how we get that light shining, loving what is. Merritt Jones writes, contained within the wisdom of this awareness that everything is beautiful, that we can have awe about not only the beautiful things of the world, like a beautiful sunset or mountains or the ocean, but each other and ourselves. That's what we should be in awe about. He says, how could we possibly conspire to do harm to another when we see ourselves and the living presence of the divine in that person? How important it is when we're maybe being triggered by somebody, or over a period of time find it difficult to be around a person. How wonderful it is to be able to say, my intention is I am willing to bless this person and soften my heart. Prayers like that, I think our higher power is just saying, yeah, that's the prayer I'm looking for, and here is my help for you. I am there to uplift you in that. Another example of letting one's light shine in real life is a letter written by a prisoner. He's in Ohio. His name is Leo Wright, and he wrote this. I'm going to tell you something I want you always to remember. I'm going to make you very proud of me. Somehow, I'm going to reach the hearts of every inmate in this place. At least I'm going to die trying. Like Martin Luther King Jr., that is my dream. Though Dr. King phrased it in his famous speech as a dream, he was really promoting leaving a better world in which everyone was equal and free. How was he able to do this? Simply put, he saw, felt, heard, smelled, lived, and breathed a different reality in his mind than most other people saw at that time. The power of his vision convinced millions of the justice of his cause. So on that same note, I see, feel, hear, smell, live, and breathe a different reality in my mind for the people that society has regarded as unchangeable. And please don't get me wrong, I do understand that society isn't to blame. Most of us, talking about his fellow inmates, most of us made the choice not to choose love over fear. But like I said to you before, I would like to apply for the job of showing these guys that love is the way to freedom. And so the end of the story is that Leo, while he's in prison, is studying to be a New Thought minister. So he will spread that idea, that love. He will certainly let his light shine, and we can learn from that. We can be that compassion that patience and that reverence, like Leo Wright is doing from his prison cell. And then last of all, I said I was going to end with this reading by Ken Wilber. He quotes a philosopher called Plotinus. Now, Plotinus lived 204 to 270 CE. He was a Greek. He was born in Roman Egypt. And one of the things that he proclaimed was this: all things from one. Ever hear that before? I mean, we talk about that every Sunday. All those years ago. I mean, I was thinking about that this morning. That is remarkable that a lot of these, I read a book called The Daily Stoic. There's a page a day. It was written by Ryan, I forget his first name. But he writes a page, and he's always quoting people like Aristotle and Epictetus, and he particularly likes Marcus Aurelius. And there's quotes, and these guys talked the same stuff, and that's why Ernest Holmes enjoyed studying these very old philosophies, because many of them were doing like Plotinus was, telling us we are all one. So here's what Ken Wilber says. As Plotinus knew, let the world be quiet. Let the heavens and the earth and the seas be still. Let the world be waiting. Let the self-contraction relax into the empty ground of its own awareness, and let it there quietly die. See how spirit pours through each and every opening in turmoil and bestows new splendor on the setting sun and its glorious earth and all its radiant inhabitants. See the cosmos dance in emptiness. See the play of light in all creatures, great and small. See finite worlds sing and rejoice in the play of the very divine, floating on a glory that renders each transparent, flooded by a joy that refuses time or terror, that undoes the madness of the loveless self and buries it in splendor. This is just part of what he wrote. And I rise to taste the dawn and find that love alone will shine today. And shining says, to love it all, and love it madly, and always endlessly, and ever fiercely, to love without choice, and thus enter the all, to love it mindlessly, and thus be the all, embracing the only and radiant divine, now as emptiness, now as form, together and forever. The godless search undone, and love alone will shine today. That's by Ken Wilber. And I would invite you now to take a deep breath and relax in your chair, and I will close with a spiritual mind treatment based on the words that I just spoke. No place to be, only here. And I know there is but one, as Plotinus knew. It is all there is, and it's all good. It's love and peace and joy and abundance, patience, it's compassion. It has the perfect solution to any perceived dilemma in life. And I am one with it. It experiences life in, through, and as its creation. And with that power within me, I declare that even though at times I've dammed up that fountainhead, not letting out the light, even though I've done that from time to time, put my head under the covers instead of allowing that fountainhead to open up and let the light stream forward. And even though sometimes, instead of calling on the power within, I have wallowed in self-pity, wallowed in blame. Even though I now declare my intention to open the fountainhead, the power of Spirit within to do what is for me to do, and enhance my life and enhance the life of others around me and the whole world in general, the way I'm called to do, however I'm impelled to do it. I'm grateful that this is the way life works. This is the law. And I speak my word that this is so, and I release these words knowing it is done, and so it is.